is the fact that we took an oath. When we were sworn in as lawyers, the oath was to defend the Constitution, just like when you go into service. You know, defend the Constitution of the United States and that of New York. But in ours, in those days, it was also to keep inviolate the secrets and confidences of our clients. I understand they struck that from the oath. That's no longer in the oath. When I was in law school, somebody, whether a professor or somebody, handed me what they called the Code of Professional Canon of Ethics. It's under the judiciary law. You all know that. And they said, read this. There might be a couple of true false questions on it. I'm thinking to myself, are you stupid? Do you think I'm going to waste time reading that book? Wouldn't I better worry about courses that I never took in the advanced sheet? You know, I know I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to lie. My mother taught me what was best. The nuns taught me. That was my thinking, you know. And I imagine every kid in law school taking ethics today, but found out differently.
At the time, I have to say, at the time, you know, there's kind of like this bubble of youth, you know, and you're very idealistic, or I was, and you know, I mean, sure, the death threats part, that was kind of hard, and you know, come home from a date, your father's outside with a shotgun, it's like, oh boy, he must be mad at me, but we had a death threat that night. So that part, you know, was fearful, but the rest really was just, this is what my dad did, this is what he went through. There was, you know, and I would debate it with my peers and that sort of thing. And I remember when Holcomb the district attorney wanted to indict him. And I remember at one point there was talk of immunity if he, you know, could contribute to the indictment of Balgi. And I just remember, you know, supporting him in that and saying, you know, you don't need immunity. You did what you were supposed to do. The hard part came later. You know, it really came much later. Cindy Howe was a classmate. This is surprising me. Cindy Howe was a classmate of mine, and we weren't, you know, good friends, but we were classmates. And her sister was missing for quite some time. And there was no relationship to Garrow during that time, but I had conversations with her regularly about had she heard anything about her sister. And at one point said, you know, I'm going to ask my dad about it because he might know something, because, you know, my dad knew a lot about a lot of things, right? As most girls think about their dads. So I was meanwhile asking this poor man if he knew anything about Alicia Howe, not knowing that he did, when in fact he did. And so the hard part really came later, as I was going to say, you know, if I say this, you're going to hold I am, but you know, like, you know, 30 years later, I'm at a high school reunion and Cindy Howe won't speak to me. And, you know, I don't get it. I still don't get it, you know, but that's the way it is. And so it feels bad.
We had a beautiful home, beautiful kids. Frank had a good job. Everything was perfect. Then this thing came along, and it just knocked us right out of the ballpark. Our life never was really the same for years and years later. The public we just didn't go anyplace because it was too hard to face people. We lost friends. Frank lost really his job because people stopped coming to his law office. So it was a horrible experience, and I hope nobody has to go through it. But I'm kind of glad that it did happen because it did make a mark in our history, and I do feel sorry, even as bad as it was for us and hard, I can't help but feel so sorry for the parents of the poor little dead girl who knew she was dead somewhere and knew where she was and wouldn't tell. So I just hope that, even though they have to live with this for the rest of their lives, I hope that, and they probably could never forgive these two guys for what they did, but I hope that someday that they're able to understand why it all happened. And that it was just a horrible thing, and I hope that no one has to go through it. We survived.
We confront these every day. And the Houcks and the Petzes, and as sad as that is for them, I couldn't help but think, as I read this book, suppose Harmony and Belgie never said anything. Suppose rather than saying, we had this information, they never told us. Suppose that's happening today. Suppose, there are bodies that lawyers know about that are not being discovered, or there are murders that are not being known because of the lawyers' confidences. We don't know. It's like anything else. Like people always talk about the perfect crime. But because these people who did exactly the same thing as their ethics are required to do, but word got out that they did it, are excoriated. And the sad part is, as I'm sure Frank will tell you, he's excoriated by his own bar association. There were very powerful lawyers who were outraged by this and should not have been. And I was very proud of our Appellate Division 4th Department, because that's where the grievance came, and it was dismissed. And one of the things I regret, Frank, is I went back, they wouldn't give me the file anymore because I'm not on the Appellate Division, and those are confidential. But I asked them to send me all the newspaper articles, and the newspaper articles of the day were torturous. And to think that somebody is going through this for doing something that, not for their own aggrandizement. I mean, there was no mileage in this for Frank Harmony or for Francis Belgie. But they did it because that's what they had to do. And the suffering and pain that was caused to the Houcks and the Pets, as incredible as it is, I wouldn't want to start measuring who suffered the most. But lawyers here, and a lawyer's family, and a lawyer's reputation, and a lawyer's profession all suffered because we have these extremely difficult rules that we're required to honor. And we're honoring them now, we're honoring them today, we will honor them tomorrow, and we will make sure that people get fair representation. I don't lose a lot of sleep over the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is there for a reason. If I were to ask any of you non-lawyers, or lawyers already know this, but any non-lawyers, where were you last October 13th? I doubt that you'd remember unless it was your birthday. And the fact of the matter is that somebody can accuse you of a crime and say, you have to explain to us where you were on October 13th. Well, you couldn't do it. And our system has always said, if you're going to charge somebody with a crime, you have to prove the crime, and you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we've always done that, and that's the way it ought to be. And it shouldn't be that if you came in and told your lawyer, I don't know where I was on October 13th, but geez, I might have been, in the area where that robbery occurred. Does that mean the lawyer's got to go tell the DA, or my client may have been in the area where that robbery occurred? Of course not. It's silly. And yet, the more difficult and the more gruesome they are, the more graphic it gets, and the harder it is. And so my heart and my brains and my being as a lawyer go out to the Frank Harmonies of this world that when confronted with this type of situation are able to stand up to it all. And I would tell them about the story, and I would say, you don't know, when you're going to be confronted with these issues, and that's why you have to study ethics, because tomorrow the Robert Garrow of your career could come in the door, and are you going to know, are you going to be prepared, and are you going to be able to handle it and handle it correctly? It's remarkable what this episode has shown in terms of the character and profession of Frank Harmony, and I think and hope that it's all of us. The one last thing I want to say is that, Frank, I should tell you this copy is a hardbound copy. It was a gift, and it was a gift to a judge on our court when I was on the Appellate Division 4th Department, Leo Hayes. And I still am supposed to give it back when I have it. But Leo passed away last year, but I still have to give it back to Arlene, I think. But on the inside cover of it, I just thought that this kind of captured the moment. It says, to Leo, thanks for saving my ass, Frank Harmony. So I congratulate you, Frank.